Does that seem?
Do you want us to tap in?
Yeah, be alright. Okay. Right, so welcome to part 2 of this video about the location or physical environment, the ecology, the place in which crime takes place. Outline and assess sociological explanations of why some locations have higher crime rates than others. 50 marks, OCRG 673, crime and deviance. And we're going to look at, carrying on, we've explained location, we've explained the different views, listed them. We've looked at functionalism, Chicago School, Shaw and McKay's zone of transition. We could talk about, what was the point we were going to include in this bit? I said I would include that then. Okay, so we've talked about functionalists and Merton. We could talk about Hershey. We could talk about control based on bonds. Okay, all control theories essentially say that human behaviour is limited or restricted by certain controls. Some theorists, such as functionalists, argue this is because human nature is selfish and we need to control human behaviour. In this case, Hershey would agree with that, so we could put that in. We could refer to places where there are a lack of informal controls. This led to a thinker like Etzioni talking about the importance of communitarianism, like a return to community life. Thinkers like Murray might argue this is a problem because in certain areas you have what we call an underclass, where there's a shared set of norms and values that are different to the mainstream society. Now, this is different to the view taken by thinkers like Cohen. Cohen puts this down to cultural deprivation. So in some areas you'll find groups which have less norms and values which support them in being successful in education. Working class boys are therefore not living up to middle class values, and so they experience status frustration, and so they turn to a solution to this problem, status frustration, which is a subculture where they turn the norms and values of the wider society on their head, and so they reject those values that they can't achieve. And we've also got the view, the difference between these views could be said that Murray argues it's related to the welfare state, and it's partly a result of selfish choices which are immoral. You find a high concentration of people, or a minority of the poor in urban areas who have make these selfish choices. Cohen argues it's cultural deprivation, so you've got a high concentration of people who lack the right norms and values to be successful. So that's partly a need for them to be more educated into norms and values. It's partly their responsibility. The Shaw and McKay, focusing most on areas and culture, developed the concept of cultural transmission. And the cultural transmission theory is originally developing the idea that people in certain places have distinctive values. This was adopted by Cohen and built into the subcultural theory. Murray's view is also subcultural theory. So the argument is that places might have a concentration of people who commit crime. We can evaluate these views. How can we evaluate the functionalist and Shaw and McKay's views on crime? What do you think? What do you think the Marxists would say about the views that we've looked at so far?
Zones of transition are like a result of capitalism. They're the ones that are like cheap labour force. So they've got low pay, can be sacked easily. So really their crime is a result of poverty and material deprivation, rather than this lack of sense of community that Shaw and McKay refer to.
Good. So we've got this argument that the theories that focus on place, so there's a lack of sense of community, ignore and underplay the fact that the reason for crime is due to capitalism, poverty, material deprivation, where these workers are given low pay. So rather than a lack of community, the problem is actually the fundamental economic structure itself. There is evidence from studies that there is a clear sense of community in urban areas. Despite poverty, people work together, care for each other, and have informal relationships which are supportive. So there are points against this. So the problem with urban areas may be there's a high concentration of the urban exploited poor, according to Marxists, and the problem is capitalism itself. It might be supported by Marxists such as, Dwayne? Hebdig? Okay, Hebdig. He is a NeoMarxist, and he argues that the redevelopment... What does he say? What does Hebdig say?
What does Hebdig say?
No? Nearly? Okay, well Hebdig talks about skinhead subcultures in the working class.
When they threaten to redevelop the area.
Exactly, yes, that's right. Good. Redevelopment of the East End of London. Good.
So I told you, I know some just don't know the names.
Okay.
Into
I'm
what?
sure that if you work on that, you can build that more
Skinheads,
and more.
they had skinheads and then wore Doc Martens, and it was kind of like a way of protesting about their homes being destroyed.
Exactly, so it's a form of rebellion or defiance or way of protesting.
And it still shows a sense of community as well, because they've all like come together to...
Very good. Okay, so there's still that sense of community in the working class community. They want to preserve the community and way of life. And so their skinhead subcultures were a form of defiance against the capitalist redevelopment to try and preserve the way of life. So again, the problem is not a lack of community, the problem is capitalism, which explains urban crime. So the functionists are overplaying the problem of the lack of community. Shaw and McKay are overplaying the problem of the lack of shared social order. Okay, so we've done Marxists. We can go into another theory such as left realist. Well, let's do some more before we do left realist.
Feminist.
Let's do feminists. Okay, feminists.
I don't know.
What would feminists normally say? What would be the key concept they'd normally come out with?
Patriarchy, first of all.
Okay, so you're showing knowledge, aren't you?
Yeah.
So what is crime in urban areas a result of? It's to do with patriarchy. What are young men in urban areas trying to do? What are females affected by? Females affected by patriarchy. Okay, so young males.
Could talk about masculinity is Messerschmitt.
Good. Yeah. Okay, young females. Just generally females. What can we say about them?
Hygienists would say that they're controlled.
Yeah.
So how would you link
Good.
this back to location?
Okay, so we say in urban areas, street crime is a result of young males trying to achieve masculinity. Okay, and females are controlled more than males, so they're less likely to be in the public domain, public sphere of the street.
Because they're meant to be housewives. They're depicted as housewives.
Exactly.
They're meant to be at home.
They're meant to be at home in the private sphere of the family. So the feminists would point out two things. Firstly, street crime is a result of patriarchy and masculinity. Female victims, vulnerable because of this issue.
Can we talk about the London Islington study about that women in Islington were afraid to go out after 8 p.m, which when it got dark?
Good. Excellent. So we got
Sexual, yeah.
female victims more at risk. Islington Victim Survey shows a 14 times greater risk of sexual assault. They're afraid to go out at night, after dark, for fear of being victims. The feminists would also emphasise the private sphere of the family is a place, it's a physical space in which crime takes place that we often ignore because we overplay the emphasis on street crime. So we probably criticise the functionalists and Marxists for overplaying street crime and their explanation of it, and underplaying the private sphere of the family. Similarly, the Marxists would point out that crime takes place in suites, and crimes in the suites, okay, not only the streets. So crimes of the suites are referring to the business, corporate, white-collar crime. So that's a similar point. I've mentioned some studies. Then we can evaluate that. We could say, okay, that's true, but what other perspective could we bring in? We've brought in NeoMarxist, we've done Marxist. Left realists we could do interactionists before we do left realists, and then we can do left realists, okay? So interactionists point out what?
What relates to like Becker and the Raven?
Yeah, good.
And you could use the study by
I've put something on the board to help you.
Young
Jock Young, well done.
to do about the cannabis smokers. Yeah, I thought it was young.
Okay, where was that? What place?
In Notting Hill.
Good. Good.
Today's my day.
The one both achieving today. Yeah.
And it's just about like as soon as they were labelled, their deviance amplified. So it went on to like harder drugs, and then it ended up in drug dealing. So you could say that interactionists might argue that those in this zone of transition or whatnot, they might be labelled as deviant individuals because they're, you know, it's characterised by immigrants and people in poverty. And as a result, they get labelled, and then it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. You know, they become the label.
Good. So we can say then that the functionalists and the Chicago school might be overplaying the idea that these statistics are reality for urban crime. They might be ignoring the fact that the labelling is taking place. This leads to problems in itself. Excellent. And then we can... Is it still running?
Yep.
Yeah? Okay. Is there any more theories before left through this? Well, let's do the neo-Marxist view. Hall, Taylor, Walton and Young. Okay, the Hall study, policing the crisis, young black males, urban areas. Okay, they're labelled as muggers.
Another form of deviance. Yeah.
Another example, form of deviance amplification. Okay, where there's a fear and a concern about the threat posed to social order by young black males, seen as muggers. A street crime, which is violent. Okay, so it's crime in the place, the street. And this theory can be criticised as because it focuses on the idea of crime as a political act. Okay, the left realists say crime is not a political act. For example, mugging does not have a political motivation. And the theory also says that there's labelling, racism, class prejudice in the way the police deal with urban crime. Again, the left realists would say, and the right realists would support this, that this crime is a reality. In other words, the statistics are not flawed, they are basically accurate. And then we could go into left realists, where we could say that Urban crime is a result of marginalisation, relative deprivation and subcultures. In other words, social exclusion and people feeling deprived compared to others because of advertising and the close proximity. In other words, geographical closeness of the relatively rich and relatively poor, which you find in cities. And so therefore people are closely packed together, densely populated in cities from relatively wealthy or relatively less well-off backgrounds. And so there's always that opportunity for people to think they've got more than me, or they've got less than me, but they're still getting away with an easy lifestyle.
And the fact that even with the proximity, left realists still say that because crime is a reality, it's the working class against the working class, not the working class against the middle class.
Exactly. So majority of crime is a reality that is street crime by the working class, black or ethnic minority, urban, but it's not a political act because it's marginalised people who are victimising marginalised people. So therefore we need to take it seriously and do something about urban crime. Subcultures are just a solution to these problems, so we need to introduce more social justice into society. The right realists, what would they say? Oh, we've done them, okay. We've referred to Murray. Okay, so we've already covered the right realists. So we could use the left realists, we could use the right realists to criticise left realists. So the left realists are too soft in their approach on crime. They fail to offer tangible, strong measures to deal with crime. Their explanation is still too left-wing, still too sympathetic to offenders. Instead, we need to look at crime as a selfish choice, not a way of coping with problems like marginalisation. And
Sociologist.
We could bring in Sampson.
Researcher.
Okay, violent crime is a result of a community's inability to achieve its objectives. So people feel economically marginalised in places like Longbridge in Birmingham, where there's a loss of jobs because of the closing down of car factory plants. And so where people are unable to achieve the objectives of a happy, comfortably, economically secure lifestyle, there's a sense there's no informal controls. How can someone criticise a young man who's committing a crime if they're unable to say, conform to the rules because there's a benefit if you do so? Think about your future, son. If there's no sense of a future, as the punks, Sex Pistols sang in the 1970s, no future, then there is this sense that it's difficult to informally control crime. The right realists would say the way of informally controlling crime is to introduce more punishment in urban areas, so that people are more backed up by the police. The left realists would say we need the community and the police to work together in urban areas so that urban communities know they're supported. Ultimately, there are many views, and your conclusion should refer to which views or which side of the argument is perhaps the strongest and which is perhaps the least effective in explaining urban crime. Hope this has been useful. Any questions, Daniel_Butcher@hotmail.co.uk.